So first off, I just want to thank you all for having me here. It's really great to have this event here in Austin, as we were talking about before. I've actually spoken at PyData's in other parts of the country. It's really, really great to have it here at home, right, and in this community. So really excited about that. Anyone who's ever seen me speak before, I usually give technical talks, but this time I have a lot of other things on my mind these days, so I was going to talk about that. So, and kind of in a question and answer style, some of the crazy questions that come to me over and over and over and over again, and kind of how, maybe a little bit of discussion around that, right? So we're going to talk about data science and how to build data science projects, how to deploy data science teams, all of these things like that. And I'll just kick it off now. So first off, who do you think you are, Katrina? Right? Right? I get this one quite a bit. Okay. So I'll tell you who I am, actually. I was kind of given this really beautiful introduction before. I'm a longtime Pythonista. I love the Python ecosystem. I actually got started back in 1998 was when I first started programming in Python. I was back for way before we had this amazing ecosystem, so working with like NumArray and numeric and all of those things like that. I'm old school like that, right? I actually got my first job working at an artificial intelligence research and development company back in 2001. And yes, we were a Python shop. So believe it or not, that's actually how they found me. So I was an officer in the ACM chapter on campus. They gave a talk about Python. I immediately started gushing about how much I love the language, and I got a job. So this is kind of where I got started. Since then, I went on to get my PhD and continued to study artificial intelligence, went on to do a whole bunch of other things that were already mentioned, right? I have applied machine learning in a lot of different places, right? Everything from oil and gas to finance to business intelligence to insider threat detection, a lot of different things, right? Chatbots, question answer systems. I feel like I've kind of run the gamut, right? So that's kind of my whole story. And then as far as community building, it was mentioned that I am on the board of directors for NumFOCUS. Very honored to have been nominated and elected into that position, and something I take very seriously. So please, as I was mentioning before, if you want to come say hi, tell me more about yourself, I am very interested in helping to foster community. So who the heck is Cloudflare, right? We've mentioned it a couple of times. For those who don't know who Cloudflare is, they're a leading security, performance, and reliability company. A lot of different, we have about 200 million internet properties on our network. We have metals out in about 192 cities all across the world. And we have about 10% of Fortune 1000 companies are using at least one Cloudflare product, right? So we have this huge network. We're primarily known for security. I think people have heard of us mostly in that context. We provide DDoS protection, bot management, things like that, VPN. People have heard of like 1.1.1.1. It's a pretty popular, and Warp, all these other things like that. We have some really good products that are out there, and a lot of things that are actually available for free, so definitely check it out, okay? People may also be aware of who we are because of our lava lamp wall. Not sure if anybody's aware of this. The reason I put this up here is kind of a cool thing. We have cameras trained on the lava lamps to take pictures of the movement of the lava lamps, and that is used to seed our pseudo-random number generator that is then used across the entire company. So a lot of people are familiar for that, and it's actually really funny because when people come visit the office in San Francisco, they're like, should I not walk in front of the lava lamps and stuff like that? Actually adding your picture in there creates more entropy, and it's really, really good for the random number generator. So it's a very good thing to do, actually. So any questions about Cloudflare, please let me know. We're just getting started in the data science team over at Cloudflare. Luckily, I have a couple of my team members here today as well. So I'm not going to talk about Cloudflare. I'm going to talk about all this other stuff, right? Okay. So what does your team do again? Okay, I get this one a lot, okay? My team is actually, especially at Cloudflare, we're in a kind of a strange location. We are in the finance department. So the number of times I've tried to explain to somebody I'm not an accountant is actually pretty funny. Okay. And then also I've been under CTOs, I've had data science organizations that are off on their own, under IT, under a lot of different places, right? Under operations even, right? So data science can exist in a lot of different places within an organization. And so, but I think it's really important to make sure that we're on the same page of what my team actually does, right? We are the ones that do predictive decision making, right, in an automated way. And that's the easiest way to describe what we do. So we take a business requirement, and we're going to take the data that we have to support that, do a lot of exploration in that area, right? Build a machine learning model or some other sort of model, or create some sort of insights, create rules, whatever we have to do. And then we will deploy that out into a production system, monitor it, and keep it going, right? I thought this was a really funny picture, by the way. I stole this from Microsoft, so don't blame me for the picture, but that it has the start at the beginning and then it has the end at the bottom. I've actually never been on a data science project that ended. So, because there's retraining and redeployment, right? And models drift over time, and we have all of these things that are going on, right? And so it's not as simple as building a procedural set of code that's going to move us into the set of features that we know are completely reliable and completely stable and are going to work forever, right? It is going to change. The ecosystem is going to change. The inputs are going to change. People are going to adapt in response to the things that are coming out of a machine learning model, right? So we have to keep on going through this process over and over and over and over again and constantly refine. So I just always think it's funny because, people are like, oh, well, we'll just take this data scientist off this project and we're going to move over here. And then, 3 months later, everyone's wondering, why did this project suddenly blow up and why is everything all crazy? And, all of those things like that, right? It's because we have to keep on going, right? It's a process. So my team also works with a lot of other teams, obviously. Right? We have to work with the business people. We have to work with the product managers. We have to work with the engineers. We have to work with the application engineers. We have to work with back-end engineers. We have to work with data engineers. It means that we're also going to have to work with DevOps in order to keep a system that's up and running. Always big shout out to the DevOps people, right? Keeping these things on the rails is a really an important job. So I just want to make sure that it's clear. None of this happens by itself. We don't work in a silo. We have to work with a lot of different things. And anyone who's ever worked with a data scientist, or several of y'all in this audience have worked with me, we ask a lot of questions, right? So that's what we do. All right, so you are an engineer, so why is your team writing code? This is actually one I get from leadership all the time, believe it or not, where they're amazed at the number of resources that it takes to create a successful data science team, right? We're gonna need development environments, we're gonna need cloud environments, or we're gonna need compute, we're gonna need access to data, we need sandboxes, we need all of these different things that are going on, all the other teams that I was mentioning in the last slide. It's a much bigger picture, right? So this is one of my favorite quotes about data scientists. We're also known as the folks who are better engineers than statisticians and better statisticians than engineers. Depending on who you talk to, people will claim I am neither. So, I maintain that it's a very fun space to work in because you do get to ride that boundary between mathematician and an engineer, in my opinion. So, open source, can we really do that? The horror on so many people's faces when they realize the data science team is using all open source technologies is amazing. So, and immediately I get sent to go talk to the legal department, and I immediately have to go explain to CTOs and all of these things like that, that open source is going to be safe, right? So some of the concerns that people talk about legal liability. So if people are injecting proprietary software into an open source project, even if we're not aware of it or we had nothing to do with it, companies are legally liable. These are things that, especially administrators are going to have to keep an eye on, right? Licensing compliance, big one. Obviously, we all want to, keep it all above board. Reliability is one that I think that people talk about in communities. Sometimes it can be really tempting to change APIs very quickly, not realizing that these silent people out here are all using your software and that it makes big changes on the other side that they may or may not be aware of before the changes happen. Okay? Quality risks. In quality risks, one of the big things that I want to mention in this area really comes back to security. Security risks are a big problem. Cloudflare is a security company above and beyond anything else, right? The amount of time that we spend reviewing software for security risks is astounding, okay? So in particular, we are very, very concerned about not introducing security risks into our software because it's going to affect all those 200 million internet properties that I just mentioned that are on the Cloudflare network, right? Support, things like that. What if a project is sunsetted, right? And we have a heavy dependence on it. What happens to us? Are we suddenly going to have to own this? Are we going to fork it and create our own repository? Are we going to, what are we going to do if this project goes away? And what is the chance of that happening, right? So some of the things you look for is an active community space. Are people actually engaging in the process? Do they have a lot of open tickets and a lot of open issues? Do they have a lot of, people chattering on the projects? Things like that. Does it look like they have some financial support? Things like that. And it can really be tricky, right, to really get that buy-in from leadership organizations. However, especially in the data science space, I just want to be clear. We were talking a little bit about the PyData ecosystem. This is the genie that is not going back into the bottle. This is the reality of what we work with every single day, and it is what people are learning to work with in order to get into this field. This is the grand equalizer that I don't think you can avoid it at this point in time in data science. And so it's going to stay open, right? And it's also, especially for retention efforts, we want to retain top talent. We have to pay attention to this area and we have to embrace it. I'm obviously a huge fan of open source. I wouldn't be working with NumFOCUS if I wasn't, and very big advocate for projects. I don't contribute code very often anymore, but I definitely am much more involved in the community side. But very, very big fan, and I am very interested in fostering those relationships so that industry and open source can have a relationship that is not parasitic, that is also very healthy to moving forward the goals that we all have in mind, right? So this is my favorite one. Can't you just make your model do whatever, right? Like, this is the question I probably get the most often and have for the last decade, right? Like, this is so simple. Why can't your model just do what we want it to do, right? There are a lot of other comments and questions that I feel fall under this same category, by the way, right? So there is always the, I have this really, really great idea for a feature that it's just going to absolutely kill it, and absolutely. Everyone's excited about data science, and I think that we should interpret it that way, right? We're all on the same team, and it's nice to have input from other people. On the other hand, it also can become overwhelming because so many people want to get involved and so many people want to be a part of it. One of my favorite coworkers always describes it as like when you're building a house, you don't necessarily want the electrician working on the plumbing system, and you don't necessarily want the plumber working on the roof, and all these different things like that. We all have to come together to make successful projects happen, right? But at the same time, I just want to make sure that there are ways that we can foster better relationships between partners, right? That we're all working on this, this project together. So, one thing to remember, right? I love this quote. Essentially, all models are wrong. Some are useful, right? Very important to remember. Attributed to statistician George Box. And this is something that I think is absolutely true, that no matter how good a machine learning model is, it is going to get things wrong, no matter what. What is our tolerance for the machine learning model getting things wrong? We cannot help it. It will happen. I can guarantee it. Even with, 99.99999% confidence, you're going to hit that 0.0001% of the time, right? And then, like I said, inputs change, stimulus changes. So what happens in these new novel instances where suddenly we don't know how the model is going to react to these new instances that we haven't seen in the past, right? So one of the things that I really, really, really recommend to people is to take risk mitigation plans very seriously, okay? Machine learning models rarely get to function by themselves without any kind of guardrails in place on either side, right? So we want to make sure that we have a risk mitigation plan, make sure that we're getting good inputs, make sure that we're getting reasonable outputs, making sure that our machine learning model is also augmented with business logic so that we're not doing anything that's obviously wrong, right? And it seems pretty obvious, but at the same time, I think that sometimes data science is billed as being this magic bullet, that it can do anything and that it's magic, right? And that we are always able to create perfect models that are going to, make everything all better, and we're all going to become rich and retire and do open source full time, right? But that's probably not the case. That in the real world, we're going to have to be very, very careful about how we're using it, and also evaluate whether or not the application that we're writing this machine learning model for is actually worth all the effort and time, work, patience, energy, all of those other things that are necessary, that there's a real payoff for it, not just because it's cool, okay? And then one thing I just want to make sure people understand, please resist the urge to start manipulating your data in order to get the result that you want. There is a certain amount of tuning that we can do. There's a certain amount of ways that we can boost data, things like that are well-known techniques. But when you start putting fake data in order to get what you want, or you start doing something really strange like adding a feature that includes the, very biased opinions of one of your coworkers so that you can get it to do what you want it to do, that's like, no, just stop, okay? Don't do it. And then always remember transparency, education, and please let's keep things civil. We're all on the same team here, okay? Which those of you who have worked with me know that I don't always abide by that last one, but I try my best, okay? So, all right, what the heck is going on with our AWS bill? This is the one that I spent probably the majority of my time answering, right? Did your team really just run a $40,000 AWS job? The answer is yes, we did. And this goes back to the fact that some people really underestimate what it takes to create a data science ecosystem and just how much compute we're talking about. In particular, I want to just really call out, I'm looking at you, deep learning, okay? That is the one in particular that just blows budgets out of the water, okay? And so really keep in mind, like, should we be doing cloud? Should we be doing on-prem? What is the actual trade-off there? And what's going on? And ultimately, in a lot of cases, we have decided to do training for deep learning models on-prem because it does end up being cheaper, by the way. So, and then also just want to mention, we are data scientists. Let's build some models to predict our costs. I actually have done that several times, right? And they work, it helps a lot, and it also prepares people for what they're about to see, okay? Because the cost, I think, sometimes can really, really surprise people. Do we need to worry about the rise of the evil AI, okay? And it's like, I put this kind of tongue-in-cheek in here, but I get asked this question a ridiculous number of times, okay? So at conferences, on panels, in business meetings, all these things like that, it comes up a lot. And so my answer is always usually the stock answer that I'm gonna start worrying about the evil AI once my insurance company can actually route me to the right place when I'm giving it voice direction, right? But I mean, let's be real about the systems. Most of the systems that we actually interact with that have some sort of AI system in them, we want to throw them out the window, right? We want to just beat up our laptop and throw them out the window. But I do think there are some concerns that we should keep an eye on, okay? So introducing harmful bias into machine learning models, right? One of the big things that we're doing is we're mining the past in order to find predictive futures, right? Do we want to repeat the past, though? Do we want to reinforce those things that we have seen in the past. And one of the big call outs I'm going to put here is HR systems that look for good hires, things like that. Do we necessarily want to be using machine learning to reinforce the same people that we've hired over and over and over and over again and get no diversity of thought? Okay? And so competing machine algorithms that end up out optimizing each other to the point that they've actually just squeezed every last dollar out of a particular field, right? We're starting to see that in the housing market, where suddenly we have a situation where we're taking the output of other machine learning systems as input and stimulus into other machine learning systems, and we're just trying to optimize each other out, right? And it just becomes a very interesting competing game and kind of loses sight of the bigger picture, right? Creation of self-reinforcing information bubbles. I won't get into that too deeply. I think we all know what I'm talking about there. And our tolerance for false positives and false negatives, right? Is how much are we, like, I probably see at least once a week on Facebook or something like that, somebody's like, wow, look at my crazy recommendation that this online marketplace gave me, right? How funny is this? Ha ha, right? It's funny until it's your cancer diagnosis, right? It's funny until it's your mission critical system that sends your plane off in the wrong direction, right? It's, these are really, really, like, what are we willing to put up with, and what is the risk that we're willing to take on by having this be a part of our society, right? And then privacy and control over personal data is a really big deal, right? Who's seeing our data, who's using it, who's profiting off of it? Are we just consumers, or are we part of this society, right? And then I just want to mention this one because it's really important and something that comes up pretty often. Do you realize that you're the only woman at this conference, in this meeting, on this project, in this room, things like that? It happens all the time, okay? And so first off, I'm just going to let you guys know, yes, I am always aware that I am, okay? Like, I am extremely aware when that happens, okay? It never needs to be pointed out to me. And please, let's not turn it into like, what is the intention behind that? Because my mind can spin out for hours about what people are trying to say when they ask these questions, right? But I do want to remind people, right, that there are some pretty depressing statistics around this, right? Women in technology is still a problem. Creating space for each other, being able to create communities where people are able to participate. And I do want to call out, even open source communities sometimes can be a very, very difficult place for women to be able to feel comfortable contributing, right? And so can we make space for each other, right? And then obviously I'm not the only woman here in this audience, right? But at the same time, I do want to mention that, let's all agree to make some space for each other, right? And also for all of us as a community, can we agree that we're going to mess things up, we're going to get things wrong, we're going to try and we're going to fail, we're going to say the wrong thing, we're going to do all kinds of crazy things over the course of our lifetimes, and we're still going to get back up and we're going to try again because it's worth it, and we want to keep going forward towards the goals that we want to get to, okay? So I just want to make sure that we're all have that agreement with each other and that we're able to move forward that way. And now it's kind of your turn. Like I said, track 3, 11 a.m. Please come talk to me. Sorry I had to kind of go a little fast, but thank you very much for your attention.